Hey guys, welcome back. So last time we took a look at the two beta revisor types, SETI and TISE. Now we're going to take a look at the corresponding delta revisor types, which would be NEFI followed by FINE. And I want to begin with the NEFIs, beginning here with Kristen Schaal, which is somebody that we looked at earlier briefly, but this time we're going to look more closely as well as take a look at what she says. Here we go.
I remember the first time I met the guys, we had to have a meeting to because they didn't know.
So first of all, we see immediately the body swaying. The head is kind of starts leaning to the side very loosely. Eyes are toggling up and looking up towards us. Here you can see what I like to call the taut square effect, where the levator and depressor muscles that are on the mouth are both simultaneously pulling.
Guys, we had to have a meeting to
So more fidgeting, more body swaying, bubbling momentum.
They didn't know, we never met before. And it was me and...
Notice also the mouth keeps wobbling its shape. This is what I call the FI's tendency to have a wobbling mouth. The lip kind of shifts its shape continually.
And the two guys.
And that's because of the candid emotional expression. The candid expression doesn't coordinate itself because it's not measured. And that literally means that the emotive expression of the face is not measured. Which leads to this asymmetrical effect happening.
And Reese and James Bowen, and it was really just me trying to understand what they were saying because the accents were so thick I could barely comprehend. And we were...
Look at how her head, when it looks around, it very much leaves the cone, the PI cone, and just glances everywhere. That's a very PE signal.
We were all waiting because
here as well, way off to the side. Okay, so those eye toggles were very interesting, right? Almost like a complete circular rotation, starting here, down there, down here, then over here to the side.
Oh, it's a lot. It's heavy. New Zealand? That's so boring. I don't want to go to New Zealand.
Okay, so obviously we see the clear PE energy going on here, similar to how we saw it with the SETIs, for example, the casual sways and so forth. But we are seeing some difference in how the eyes here of these guys are much more horizontal in focus, while her eyes are much more broad and scattered. But all right, let's speak a little bit into what the psychology is saying.
New Zealand? That's so boring. I don't want to go to New Zealand. I guess my ideal day off would be I would wake up and I'd feel happy and I wouldn't remember why. And then it would hit me. It's like, oh my God, you fell in love last night. And then I'd be like, oh, that's great. And then
so she was asked what would be your ideal day off. And rather than thinking about something that she's done before that might be interesting to do again or so forth, she is imagining an unrealistic, non-existent situation, like a hypothetical.
And then I'd be like, oh, that's great. And then I would also remember, and it's your birthday. And then I would...
She's just making this up as she goes, by the way. She's just adding on things like, you fell in love last night. Oh, and it's your birthday. Oh, and what else can I add to this hypothetical situation to make it more interesting?
Jump up out of bed with this thrilled excitement because I was in love and it was my birthday. And then I would step outside and it would just be this really sunny day, and then a car would pull up and it'd be a limo, and the door would open up and I'd look inside and it would be the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Anthony Kiedis would be like, get inside, Kristen. It's your birthday, and then I'd jump in.
Notice the head sways, they kind of have a mixture of the PE energy, but also this sassy TE energy in them.
And we would go to Coney Island and just drink beers on the beach. And then they'd be like, Kristen, what about that guy that...
Notice also she's kind of enacting with little parodies the scenarios that are going on in her head, these hypotheticals. She's playing the skits out and then taking on the voices of the actors within her mind as she's exploring these ideas. Okay, so I'm going to write some of this down. Wild, hypothetical, scenario generation, mini skits, and parodies. That's what I'm seeing here. Now, since this video is rather short, there isn't much more going on in these 2 minutes, but we can read much more about her. Okay, so we read here that Kristen Schaal is an American actress, comedian, and writer. Actress, comedian, writer. Wait a minute, before we go any further, writer, by the way, she is an author of a book called The Sexy Book of Sexy Sex. It's a book about how sex is so hilarious and shouldn't be taken seriously and how it's funny. Basically, it's satirical. So she definitely has a sense of humor, which also comes into being a comedian. So comedy is a big focus for her. Okay, next it says that she is best known for her voice roles as, and then there's a whole list here. Basically, she's a voice actress. And let me just show you what that looks like. This is a collage of some of her more famous works. She plays as Mabel Pines on Gravity Falls, also as Sarah Lynn here. She plays in The Simpsons and just all over the place. And this itself shows a little bit of our personality, right? All these characters are cartoony, they're goofy, and she has a wide expressive range of the kind of personalities that she can jump in and out of. So I'm going to put this here. So there's actors, but then she's also voice actress. I'm going to put that as a separate category. And maybe I'm going to put here voice actors for cartoon characters. All right, let's continue where we left off. This is Charlene Yi, who is also a comedian.
I think so. I think I was a bit naive and a bit scared of the idea of love, maybe.
You can see here this square for 4 points pulling her mouth to the sides.
A bit naive and a bit
there, for example. Yeah, you can see that very strongly.
Scared of the idea of love, maybe.
Eye toggles.
Maybe just because I've seen too many like reality TV shows where people are like smooching and in jacuzzis and stuff.
She's got these kind of head bobbles that are very subtle, but you can see them constantly happening.
With like 3 people. And so I think then
more eye toggles.
Certainty of love kind of scared me, of never knowing if it's for sure.
She does these perk ups. Oftentimes she just kind of animates her eyes like a surprise.
But I think, you know, with everything, nothing's for sure. And
Okay, I think you can see the similarities between these two.
And then I'd be like, oh, that's great. And then I would
So
also
that
remember. And
I don't know, he was really good at improv, so whenever...
Very similar. All right, let's analyze some of what she has to say.
I think so. I think I was a bit naive and a bit scared of the idea of love, maybe. Maybe just because I've seen too many like reality TV shows where people are like smooching and in jacuzzis and stuff.
A little scared of the idea of love. Okay.
So I think the uncertainty of love kind of scared me, of never knowing if it's for sure. But I think, you know, with everything, nothing's for sure, and you just accepting that, just living in the moment and seeing where it goes.
Nothing's for sure, just living in the moment, seeing where it goes. It's kind of a bit of a paradox there, right? So she's a little scared of the idea of love because she doesn't know if it lasts or if it's consistent, and yet at the same time she believes that nothing is consistent, and we just got to live in the moment and see where things go dynamically. Her very own philosophy disallows her from feeling stability.
I don't know, he was really good at improv, so whenever we were improvising, it was always a good surprise, like, oh, that was a really good idea, and try not to laugh from that. Yeah, it was fun. We lied to the crew and said that he was a diva, saying that he really needed raisins before each take. And so we got one of the crew members to give him raisins, and they were like, he was like, here you go, boss, and Michael's like, he just gave me raisins. He was like, hey, what is this for? And then I think my friend ended up getting really scared and just like ran away.
Okay, so kind of like Kristen Shaw, she is telling a story about kind of reenacting the characters and making the faces of everybody that talked. So mini skits when storytelling.
But I mean, it was a lot funnier watching it. I think we were like crying from laughing.
Real doc footage of real interviews with real subjects. I hate that I overuse that word.
You can really see the mouth tension in this angle.
And so...
Okay, I'm going to stop here because some of this makes more sense when we look at what she does. So Charlene Yi is an American actor, comedian, musician, and writer. So the actor part here is where she does improv. So this is a very similar, almost identical skill set to Kristen Shaw. So let's add some of this to here. Actress, comedian. The books she's written are Oh, the Moon, Stories from the Tortured Mind of Charlene Yi. Also very cartoony, just like Kristen Shaw's character she plays. And the other one is You Can't Kill Me Twice, So Please Treat Me Right. And inside this book is a lot of illustrations mainly, which are also very cartoony, like here and here. I think she made these herself. So I'm going to write here, I think this book is somewhere between a comic, so comic/art book is what I'm going to write here, because it's not entirely like a novel or anything like that. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next sample. This is Kate Micucci.
I mean, I grew up in what I thought was the country because I was born in New Jersey, but then when I was 8, we moved to Pennsylvania.
First, the Vultology. So we see here the body swaying going around.
What was the country?
Like there. One more time.
Country?
See that?
New Jersey, but then when I was 8, we moved to Pennsylvania. Oh yeah, New Jersey.
There's a restlessness to her body. She's kind of always fidgeting.
It's not the country.
No.
It's a nice
You see that?
state, though. It gets a bad rap, but it's a nice state. But
It's like it's a nice state, you know. It's like excitable, childish energy.
Moved to Pennsylvania.
yeah, to Nazareth, Pennsylvania, where there really isn't much happening. Oh, you're from Nazareth? All right. But no.
There again, the fidgeting in the body, but also kind of like the upward lift. The torso keeps doing this kind of thing where it, you know, rises, even though the shoulders may not be rising. The torso kind of does this upwards lift. Also, notice her eyes. They're very bright and open, and the upper eyelid is not at all hooded over her eyes. They kind of have that naive, doughy-eyed look to them. But okay, now let's move on to the psychology for a minute.
But yeah,
You moved to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, to Nazareth, Pennsylvania, where there really isn't much happening. Oh, you're from Nazareth? All right. But no, there's like a lot of fields, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be a country girl. I was 8. I made my mom buy.
See, right there, you saw another one of those skits. Oh, I'm going to be a country girl. So basically, she's kind of imitating the trope of the countryman walking like this. It's kind of like a little cartoon image in her mind that she's enacting with her body. So wanting to be a country girl is one of her little things. She also has those mini skits when storytelling.
Buy me a corncob pipe, and I would like walk around the yard like, hey, I'm Huck Finn, you know.
More of that, yeah.
Oddly, they sold them at the Bagel Smith in New Jersey.
Hunts, okay.
Yeah, he's killed a lot of things.
So here you see the asymmetrical smirk, right? The asymmetry of the mouth. You'll see a bit more of that. Right there, the question she was asked was, do you go hunting? Because, you know, she wants to be a country girl, or she wanted to. The dad's killed a lot of things.
But mostly, one day he killed 2 deer, a girl deer and a boy deer on the same day.
Oh.
I know, I felt really bad for both of them. But I wrote a letter to the deer in Pennsylvania to stay away from my dad or he will kill them. It's called Dear Deer.
Okay, so there's a degree to which children are kind of fantastical in their thoughts, but this is kind of next level, right? So first of all, deer can't talk, deer can't read. Nobody tells you that deer can read letters. So it's not like she had to grow out of a belief that was childish. It was more like she had a fantastical idea. Well, I'll send the deer a letter because they'll read it, without really thinking much about the impossibility of that. So I would classify this as kind of like very fantastical thinking. So I'm going to put there fantastical thinking as a child. You may want to argue that all children are fantastical, but that's actually a stereotype that is not entirely true. If you spend time with kids, you'll notice that some kids are very practical, even at age 3, even at age 4. Kids are not all the same. So fantastical thinking is something that was specific to her.
Instruments, I played the piano since I was 4, and then when I was 9, the band director came to school and they let you pick an instrument, and he played like, you know, all the different instruments, and then the trombone, he played the trombone, and I was like, oh man, everybody's gonna pick the trombone. That's like clearly the coolest one. Me and this kid Ryan that picked trombone, everybody else picked like saxophone or drums or something.
Another parody there as well as another asymmetrical mouth movement.
Drums or something. Like,
yeah.
I played trombone. I even played in the marching band, but I wasn't very good, so I would just kind of like move my slide, like pretending, you know.
Another skit.
No, it's at the Steve Allen Theater, and it's called Playing with Makuchi. But part of the whole show.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's cookies and puppets. It's really clean.
So she puts on a show with puppets and cookies, and she plays the ukulele, and also she does a lot of drawing. Here's some of her drawings. You can see here she has this cartoony animation to her. She has very childish energy as well. Here you can see more of her cartoony animations. So this has some parody with what we saw of Kristen Shaw's characters also being cartoon, and also Charlene Yi and her cartoony drawings and cartoony books. So 2 of them actually animate things cartoony wise, and one of them actually plays cartoon characters. All 3 of them themselves kind of have this cartoony vibe to me. It's almost like they themselves, when you listen to them talk, they talk with such wide-eyed, fantastical open-endedness that it's almost as though you get the sense that anything is possible. It's a kind of infectious, magical energy that they bring. And we read here that Kei Mikushi is an American actress, comedian, musician, and then these are some of her roles, a lot of comedy roles here, and a lot of child movies like Scooby-Doo and DuckTales. So comedian, actress, and I'll change this one to musician, ukulele. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. So as far as motifs go, you really couldn't ask for a more airtight correlation than these three samples. They all have imaginative capacity. Kristen Shaw shows that when she dreams up wild hypothetical situations to questions. They all have these little mini skits that they do in parodies. They enact what's going on in their mind in real time. All three of them are comedians. All three of them are actresses, specifically voice actress for cartoons. And the cartoons are also something that they draw, not just play in. They have an interest in magic, games. So this is one solid shade of NeFi that you'll come across. This one I sometimes call the bubbly fairy shade of NeFi. But of course, it's not the only shade of NeFi that is out there. So let's continue on and see what other kinds of NeFis we come across. So next we're going to look at Emily Wapnick.
A multi-potentialite is someone with many interests and creative pursuits in life.
A multi-potentialite is someone with many interests and pursuits in life.
That's the definition that I use.
That's good.
So it was something that I started noticing this pattern in myself when I was just looking back over my life. I had this pattern where I'd become really.
She also has this kind of sassy sideways movement as well.
Just looking back over my life.
There, for example.
I had this pattern where I'd become really interested.
These kind of sways. Now, bobbling and casualness is part of the general PE energy. But when there's also kind of like this sort of thing, that's when the sassiness comes in from the TEFI axes. And you can see also the tension in her mouth, for example, here, pulling up and down at the same time.
Really interested in an area, and I would dive in deep.
See the wobbling.
And like go really hard and be so excited about this area, and I'd get to be pretty good. And then I would hit this point where I'd start to get bored. And so I had this pattern of jumping around. It was music and design and law and film and all these different things.
So her interests have gone through music, design, law, and film, but she noticed a pattern in herself of developing boredom and then interest hopping, basically getting really into something and then just dropping it and moving on to the next thing. All right, let's continue.
And all these different things. And it actually caused me a lot of anxiety for much of my life because, for one thing, it was like I had no idea how I was going to turn this into a career.
Yeah.
I thought that I would eventually have to just choose one thing and deny all of my other passions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
And the other thing that stressed me out was just like, I don't know, I felt like there was maybe something wrong with this and something wrong with me for being unable to stick with anything. I thought like maybe I was afraid of commitment, or maybe I was like self-sabotaging, afraid of my own success. So I had like all of these thoughts, I felt like I didn't have like my one true calling. And every time I thought.
So she had fear of having commitment issues. That's interesting because we saw something like that with Charlie Yee, because she said that she's a little scared of the idea of love because of its instability and because she knows deep down nothing is for sure. And she just prefers to just live in the moment and see where things go. So yeah, so this idea, in the case of Charlene Yee, it's in the love sector, feeling as though the transience of things disallows for the permanence of love. But here, Emily Wapnick feels as though the transience of her interests disallows her from selecting a passion that she can stick with. And so both of them have different kinds of issues with what I could roughly call stability. They both see stability as something that is not in their grasp.
I found it, I was wrong. Yeah. So I didn't know what a multi-potentialite was or anything. I always viewed this trait as.
She coined the word multi-potentialite to describe the kind of people that are like her. This is actually very much like the epitome of the NE psychology explained by an NE lead, explaining what they are like to the rest of the world. And she actually wrote a book about this called How to Be Everything, a guide for those who still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. I find this title amazing because it captures so much of what we're seeing in these samples. First of all, not wanting to know what you're going to be when you grow up implies that she hasn't grown up. And what did we see of these other three over here? That they seem to be childish. And so Emily Wapnick also is a bit of a child in the way that children often find everything fascinating because everything is new and life hasn't yet kind of constrained you down to one thing because you haven't learned everything that life has to show you yet. And so there's, again, something fantastical here about this belief in everything, being everything. So let's go here and add how to be everything, a guide for those who still don't know what to be when they grow up. Perfect. That's a good amount of motifs. All right, let's move on to the next sample. This next one is Quinn. This is a volunteer that I'm personally familiar with, and she allowed us to add her video to the database. So really grateful for her. So obviously the loose body sways, and that's kind of a little quirky perk up. The eyes kind of going bright with a little bit of a silly edge to it. A little bit of a parody in there. You can see the mouth here also has the 4-point pulls.
Just, yeah, be you. Be as you as you can be.
Which me? I have 3 different personalities.
Well, let's go through all of them.
I have 3 types of personalities.
Pretty much I try to be positive as much as I can. I'm not always good at it, I can tell you that. I usually get in trouble with it because I'm always trying to be smiling or happy. And
Always trying to be smiley or happy?
even when I'm in pain, I have a philosophy. Now that if I'm happy, I can keep going. If I can.
So we haven't talked about this much, but all of the 4 samples we've seen so far, these women, they are Seelie, which is the unguarded, vulnerable variant of the FI and the T users. And that sort of emotional attitude, it tends to be more challenged when it comes to setting boundaries, and it tends to be more people pleaser oriented, for lack of a better word. There's this tendency to want to, as you say, to try to be positive, to be smiley, to put on a good face, to highlight positivity, but at the cost of perhaps some level of internal martyrdom. This is all part of having an emotional attitude that is either Seelie or adaptive.
Basically, I guess my philosophy is charge anything you have to deal with head on.
Charge anything you have to deal with head on.
It's like the idea of chasing your fears. So
Try to get into your mind.
get into the crevices that no one knows about. Well, technically everyone knows my life. So.
Getting into the crevices that no one knows about. She's imitating like being a neurosurgeon with the dissecting tools, peeking open the brain. This is kind of the skit that she just enacted. So again, those mini skits are everywhere.
The oddballs usually. People that I consider real, it's probably the wrong terminology actually, honestly. I make up words like Sterling does, so. But basically, people who seem genuine. I usually hung out with a variety of people in high school, still do.
So she likes people who are oddballs, but honest and real.
I hung out with like the misfits in high school because they seemed real to me. They weren't trying to cover up who they were.
So the wider motif here is that she's okay with being a little bit weird. And I would say the same thing applies to the above. They all have a little bit of a quirky goofiness to them that they all kind of embrace, breaking out of the box of normalcy and almost like enjoying this wackiness. So with these 2 samples, we kind of see Emily Wapnick talks about multi-potentialites having multiple interests in being multiple things at once, not just one. And Quinn here talks about, in the beginning, that she has multiple personalities, which is true, knowing her. So there's this multiplicity of interest, multiplicity of self-concept, and there's a celebration of this weirdness, of all the different ways people can be that are not just one way and not just the normal way. Let's move on to a slightly different shade this time. This is Florence Welsh.
Like moisturizing a lot, and I try and take off my makeup every night, but sometimes I sleep in it, which is, I would imagine, because we're traveling like so many different places, and so I'm like, you know, some places are going to be hot, some places are going to be cold. I'm having a real
big body sways,
conflict of packing various looks for each show, and that suit.
When she moves, she has a little bit of the sassy swing that I mentioned earlier. You can see here again, for example,
various looks for each show,
and there as well.
That suitcase is very organized thanks to her, but my suitcase is not as well. So it's kind of a mix of vintage and.
There's Aline's again. So Florence Welch is an English singer, lead vocalist of the rock band Florence and the Machine. And then here we see a list of albums. And down here we see that she released a book titled Useless Magic, a collection of lyrics, poems, along with illustrations. And this is what the book looks like. And this is what it looks like inside. Look, this little heart drawing in there. It's also very cartoony. It looks like it was drawn by a 5-year-old, basically. Here also is another photo. And here's the back cover. Again, kind of like these very basic cartoony drawings. And here are some more. So these are the illustrations that they're talking about. So these poems and cartoony illustrations. So I'm going to write poetry, illustrations, art, cartoony. Wow, so we see a parody between Florence Welch's cartoony illustrations and those of Kate Micucci here, art/cartoons. Charlene Yee also published a book that was very comic art, cartoony, and Kristen Shaw works as a cartoon voice actress. Now, I realize there's more to say about Florence Welch than just this, but we're going to continue on. So moving down now, here we have another singer. This is Aurora Axness.
Ooh, no. I love being on stage because it makes me feel, free. But it is quite exhausting to sing, and I scream. It's quite a lot of power in this tiny body for 2 hours. So I love it when I get home and I can be in the studio. That's addicting.
So very quickly, taking a look at the Vultology, we see the wobbling lips. Here, for example, you see the wobbling going up in this direction.
How similar people are.
Here, her smile has the verticality to it. It kind of has up and down tension. We see the concerned scowl there of SI.
It's spoken in different ways. So it to look like I was kind of halfly.
Very casual hand movements and bobbling head.
So buy tickets. No.
You see the eyes there too. She kind of sparkles sometimes.
I'm gonna make my live shows much bigger.
Casual hands. So I want to explore what she says now. Starting here at the beginning. Oh, okay, I love this frame. So she has a sense of humor, and she also has a kind of, I don't care how I look, I'm going to express myself the way I want to attitude. So let's just start with that. Sense of humor.
I love being on stage because it makes me feel, free. But it is quite exhausting to sing, and I scream. It's quite a lot of power in this tiny body for 2 hours. So I love it when I get home and I can be in the studio. That's addicting. I learned a lot about how similar people are all over the world and how we need the same things. The different ways we express things, but the same things, which makes me understand also how easily we could misunderstand each other compared to what cultures we are from, and even though we mean the same thing.
The way she's folding her hands is just very all over the place.
But it's spoken in different ways, so it's really exciting. I kind of thought about queendom as my world. And that's why I call it queendom, because I don't have a penis. So I thought I call it queendom. And for the artwork,
more a sense of humor.
I wanted it to look like I was kind of halfly combined with nature. Because Mother Earth, I feel, is a mother, while the sun, I think, is a man who gives, because of the sun, Mother Earth can grow things.
She has a strong focus on the Mother Earth archetype in her work. You see, she puts a lot of attention into this more numinous element, this more magical element. Most of her videos seem to have this fairy tale fantasy vibe to them. So I'm going to put here fantastical focus.
Like a child. And so that's what I thought about the half nature, half woman.
There are a lot of her songs that focus on her either being nature itself or being half animal and so forth. So she has a focus on nature and animals and on womanhood. Let's add that here. I think that sums it up.
I could never imagine stopping making music. I could imagine to stop touring.
Oh, I can't forget that. So she's a singer-songwriter.
I'll maybe retire in 2 years.
You can really see the PE casualness now.
So buy tickets. No, I'm gonna make...
Those eyes there, the little expression she made, this one, yeah, it has very much that bright, open, PE alert eyes, but also the playful, any energy?
No, I'm gonna make my live shows much bigger. Magnifique. No, not this Italian. Magnifique.
So that was funny. So she did a parody, Magnifique, but then she said, no, that's Italian, smack. And then she did another parody, which is more accurate. So there we have again a tendency to do these mini skits and parodies. Okay, I could show more of these NEFIs, but I think that's a decent enough summary of the essential psychology and Vultology of this type. So let's do a little summarizing here first. What we see is that there's this combination of the Vultology being PE, bubbly, bouncy, with the lifting of the body and the scatteredness of the eyes. That correlates to the generation of vast amounts of hypothetical scenarios, or just these little mini skits. In other words, like they'll be imagining things in the moment and then just kind of tangent hop and then just kind of imagine an alternate scenario that relates to what's happening right now, that's imitated, lived out in the moment. And they all have this tendency to do this. Here we see it, here we see it, here we see it, and here we see it, and here we see it again. It's just everywhere. They also have this childlike energy to them and a tendency to draw like 5-year-olds, but also kind of, in a way, think like 5-year-olds, still kind of fresh in your mind, fresh in your imagination, unjaded in imagination, unjaded in one's view of potentiality and believing in the potentiality that we all have. And of course, similar to the SETIs, there is a musical focus, as in with Florence Welch and Aurora. And there's a creative focus, as we see with the artwork, which connects a little with what we saw of Beyonce, which liked to do painting. Now, if I may try to kind of summarize the essential nature of this type's cognition, what I would say is that there's a tendency in their psyche to approach the present moment as a kind of open-ended thing that isn't tied or bound to the actuality of the literality of the moment. So remember how we talked about how S is literal in nature, right? And by literal, we don't mean sensory necessarily, but we mean discrete, so that things are quantitative or exact experiences, discrete experiences, right? But with them, it's as though the real-time present moment is one of being, in some ways, anywhere else but where they are, diverging from the present moment to what the present moment seems to associate to in terms of a tangent and sort of a trope, a meme. Then they surf on those parodies, they surf on those tropes. They distract or diverge from the actual happening of the now. But it's not like it isn't the now. They live in the moment because they're PE. It's just that the real-time moment for them is defined by a kind of jumping and leaping through potentiality in a way that's kind of indiscriminate, because potentiality by its very nature is unstructured, right? It's unfurling, it's expansive. You don't know where potentiality goes, which is also different than how we saw with the NIFEs. So with the NIFEs, they also had what you might call a focus on not the fantastical, because fantastical is not the right word, but the non-literal. In the case of them, they like to focus on ideas such as esotericism and spirituality and clairvoyance. They are things that reside between literalities, but not in literality. They're not concrete, they're not quantitative. But with NIFEs, the nature of that space is quite predictable. It's not random. It's quite geometrically describable. It's consistent, it's stable. And in a way, that stability is constantly reiterated by each one of these NIFEs. They all, it's weird, right? Like, so you have these humans. They're born, they live, they articulate, they die. When they articulate what they feel is like the truth of the universe. But each time they do it, it's like the same truth over and over in a different way of saying it. That's different than how like any user will. In a way, there's a randomness to what they express because it could be anything. Potentiality is more random. But with the NIFEs, it's all convergent. So it's like consistently perceiving thematically a convergence of form and shape to the universe described in different ways. But it's a stable landscape. It's the same territory being rediscovered, re-articulated every time by another NIFE that is born. So this is a bit of like humanity's timeless intuition about what is transcendent of the literal, and that is stable. And then there's an unstable creative element of humanity that explores. Remember, PE is the explorer function, explores things we haven't yet thought about, associations that are fresh. And so that freshness of association is what we're seeing with the NeFi females. So that's a little of what we see with the NeFi psychology. Okay, so even though we've gone through this type psychology now, for the sake of completion, we also should look at what male NeFis look like. And I want to start by taking a look at Phil Lester.
Where have you been?
Eye toggles, scattered.
I've been enjoying the sun. We had a few sun rays come through the sky.
Fluid body.
Hit me there, may have got a freckle. But yeah, England was quite sunny this week, which was nice.
Restless
so
movements.
A lot, kind of.
Concerned scowling from SI.
Kind of, not really a lot, but a bit of time out.
Wobbling lips. Yep, right there. Okay, so you guys can see probably the Vultology is there. Let's see what he's talking about.
Phil, where have you been? I've been enjoying the sun. We had a few sun rays come through the sky. I think about 4. Hit me there, may have got a freckle. But yeah, England was quite sunny.
Of course, there's no way only 4 sun rays can hit you. So sense of humor is there.
This week, which was nice. So I spent a lot, kind of, not really a lot, but a bit of time outside. I feel a lot better as well. Can you tell? Am I glowing? Radiating health.
Oh yeah, okay, that's another parody. Radiating health. Again, like the mini skits.
I had a haircut today. I booked it at 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what possessed me. I think the woman hypnotised me on the phone. I was like, yeah, 10 o'clock, okay. What? I don't get up that early. So, yeah, I dragged myself out of bed. And I was scared I was going to fall asleep in the chair. So she was like, how was your day? How was your face? How was your...
Another mini skit.
Yeah, so haircut's not drastically different. It's probably going to grow back in about an hour. I said on Twitter that I was going to shave my head. I was just like, la la la, I'm going to shave my head tomorrow. And I got about 50. I just think when I've had a haircut, I look...
So he is talking a little bit about his real life experience. That gives us a little bit of convergence with the SETIs. Remember, the SETIs also describe vividly what's going on in their lives. And that part of that is the real-time nature of PE. So good, we are seeing some of that, even though mostly what we see is a divergence into not something that's actually happening to their life, but something that they're imagining connected to what they're saying. So, proportionally, these types seem to focus a lot more on what something reminds them of, which is an interesting tangent, than they do talk about what's actually literally part of their lives.
Before I knew it, I'd spent £12 and had a loyalty card. I don't know how she did it, hypnotising me with a flirtatious... Quickly, I want to say thanks to MattG124 for sending me loads of cool stuff from Canada.
Okay, I'll stop there. So part of his thing is that he's actually a comedian. So I'll put here comedian, content creator. He's also a bit of a show host. As you can see here, he's run this show called The Dan and Phil Show, which takes place at VidCon. So I'm going to put here show host. Okay, those are the main points for Phil Lester, I believe. This one's also a very generous volunteer, so thank you very much. Here he goes by SC. So here we go.
All right, hi people of cognitive type. My name is SC, or that's what I go by online. This is my first typing video, so hopefully you can
casual hands,
get some good info from this and
body swing,
come up with a conclusive type.
You can see also the tension of the mouth right here, going vertically. And here you see the snarling upwards on one side.
I already do have a type that I generally agree with for MBTI and Socionics, that sort of thing. But it'd be interesting to see if this type that you will give me from seeing this video will correlate. That'd be interesting to see, or interesting if it doesn't, because that.
Yeah. By the way, for those watching, if you want to know how your type would come out in this model, feel free to take a look at the links in the description. And we actually export you a PDF, and the PDF it has all the signals that you display and the frequency of those signals. And that's something that you can take with you as proof of why it is that we type you the way that we did.
So I am doing this at 5 a.m. because I'm avoiding my other responsibilities. But what time? But no time better than the present. I would describe myself as confident go-getter is what I like to say. Not entirely the case. I identify largely as a type 9 in Enneagram, and those are known for being very laid-back people.
I think the confident go-getter part was a joke, right? Because being a laid-back person is the opposite. So I think it was a joke. Well, since I'm not sure, I'm going to put both of them. I'm going to confident go-getter and also a laid-back person.
Yeah, I'd say that is one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses kind of at the same time. people say that like I don't get fazed by a lot of things, but you know, not letting things affect you can be good, but not entirely good, because it also means that it might be difficult for you to grow. And
I'm guessing that's emotionally, so I'm going to put here, not emotionally phased by a lot of things. So I guess thick-skinned, I guess, which by the way is more typical of men in general. All right, unfortunately, there's not too much more I can extract from the SE video, so we're going to move forward now to the next one. This is Matt, who is also a volunteer, so thank you so much for this, sincerely.
B, I think maybe developing habits.
Asymmetrical smirk.
Developing habits in a effective and permanent sort of way, like
body swaying.
Subject to the whims of my...
That was a sassy head shake. The sassiness is usually more associated with the unseelie energy or the guarded emotional affect.
Just something that like sitting in one place, listening to a teacher talk, or just being somewhere where like I can't do what I want to do.
That's a lot of head bobbling, right? That's the TE sassiness combined actually with the PE's already kind of bobbly head, so it really gets bobbly. So okay, the reason this guy is so important to keep in mind is because you know how up here we saw these very sweet fairy-like individuals that are very affectionate and warm and Seelie. If you wanted to stop your view of NeFi at them, then you would not be able to properly type someone, for example, that is a male NeFi with an unseelie emotional attitude. That combination will trip up just about every other system because they're almost sure to treat them as a T-type. And so this is what that looks like here. In a way, he's more similar to the sarcastic expressions that we saw with Rebecca Watson and Lauren Southern and those TESI women. Remember that? They also had this kind of sassy, snarky attitude. So you have sassy and snarky NeFis, particularly the men tend to be more like that way. So they won't identify as the soft and sweet kind of individuals, but that's fine. Having auxiliary FI does not mean that you have to be soft and sweet. It just means that you're explicit in whatever radiates or doesn't radiate with you, and you have a candid, non-filtered way of doing it. So this is actually FI that you're seeing here. This is not TI. Okay, now let's listen to some of what he says.
I think maybe developing habits in a effective and permanent sort of way, like where I'm not like subject to the whims of my just whatever lizard brain.
So he wants to develop habits so that he's not subject to the whims of his lizard brain. The question is, what makes you bored?
Something that like sitting in one place, listening to a teacher talk, or just being somewhere where like I can't do what I want to do. That is just exhausting and boring to me.
So he's bored by being stuck somewhere, unable to do what he wants to do?
People who think they're getting away with lying to you.
I think this question was, what's something you dislike?
God, I hate that. When they're like, when they think you don't know that they're lying. Like, come on.
So he dislikes people who think they're getting away with lying to you?
I know it, dude. Variety, really.
I think this one is, what do you like? And he says variety.
There's so many things of like, roads you can go down and explore, and like, learn cooking. Well, then there's all these recipes and all these different cuisines and all these different ways of preparing the same dish. And then there's gluten-free and dairy-free. And then there's, you just keep going into it. And then that's just all cooking. And then you can go into sewing, or you can talk about calligraphy, or there's just so much to dive deep into that.
And so here I'm going to put likes variety because there's so many roads to go down and things to explore. Definitely has parity with what we saw here about the multi-potentialites, many interests and pursuits in life. Okay, moving on. This is Mark, also a volunteer. Thank you, Mark. So here we go.
I don't know whether I am an introvert or an extrovert, somewhat kind of in the middle. People have said that, oh, I'm an extroverted introvert, or I'm an introverted extrovert, so I don't know. I've been typed a lot of things. I've been, when I first took the MBTI, I got INFP, I believe, and then it went to ENTP, ISTP, INTP, INTJ, ESTP, ISTJ.
Yep, that'll happen, by the way. So Most typological systems out there suffer from what's called a low take-retake reliability, which means if you take the test again, it will be different. So again, if you'd like to know a reliable method of being typed, head on over to vultology.com and we can take a look at your type. Now we can compare these two together because they belong to the same shade. So let's just take a look at their Vultologies side by side.
Deep into that.
So you see these sassy head shakes while the body is kind of wandering around. And then you see with him
be a certain way and kind of had to get
also dismissive head shakes and hand gestures, very similar Vultology. You see the eyes there? See that? It's called brushstroke eye toggles. So this is just going to be pretty brief, but for Mark, I'm going to put interested in typology, type hopping.
I think like once I hit 9th grade in high school, when I was like around 16 years old, 15 years old, I kind of forgot my childhood, my methods of being, you know, my way of.
So poor memory. Okay, that's not entirely insignificant. There's a tendency for any leads and high NE types to neglect their archival function, the worldview function, PI, and that part of that is memory recall. Now, I do think that the memories may be there, but the recall function, which is PI, may not be functioning. And so the recollection aspect of it may not be very conscious. All right, and this is one more from this shade. This is Spaceman, also Seelie NeFi Male.
Cutting edge.
Look at the eyes, the way that they rotate around.
Psychological and neurological research. The only problem is,
sassy head shakes. There's a little bit of a pulling to the sides.
The only problem is,
yeah, you saw that up and down here.
To get like my PhD, so I can actually.
So you have wandering eyes from the NE, unbridled expression of the mouth tension, and you have body swings from the PE. Okay, so now we're just gonna, let's see what he says.
Yeah, I would want to be doing like cutting edge psychological and neurological research.
Cutting edge psychological research?
The only problem is I don't really feel like going to university to get like my PhD, so I can actually.
No, but see, the problem is don't feel like going to university to get PhD. So you see again this combination. With SC, you see he's a confident go-getter, and yet he's a laid-back person. And this guy, he's interested in being a cutting-edge psychological researcher, and yet he can't be bothered to get his PhD. There's much more in the hopeful, ambitious sense than in the practical grind of what needs to be done. So NE on its own tends to make people distractible, and the distractibility can sometimes make it so that it's hard to finish long tasks. NE leads will also tend to be diagnosed more commonly with attention disorders like ADHD, some of which I think may be overdiagnosed, partially because the psychological community doesn't have a baseline for types. That isn't so much the issue with SE users, because SE users have this drive, this passion, but since they're not distracting types, remember, the Vultology of NE leads is called distracted. So because they are attentive, the SE leads are attentive, they actually follow through. They have better follow through, even though that's not conscientiously coming from JE. They have better follow through because the stimulus is consistent, versus here, with the NE leads, the stimulus itself may not be consistent.
A fucking rock star or something, or I would also maybe unlock the secret of human consciousness.
Okay, so that's funny. I guess the question is, what would you like to be? And he says that maybe he'd like to be a rock star, but then afterwards he says maybe he'd like to unlock the secrets of human consciousness. So, want to be a rock star or unlock the secrets of human consciousness. You see how disparate these things are, right? On one hand, maybe I'd like to be a musician on stage. On the other hand, maybe I'd like to be a serious university researcher. The breadth and expanse of possibility that they might go into is just very broad. So that's very characteristic of this type. But anyhow, I think that's enough for this. So that completes this shade. These three samples here are a much more masculine version of the NEFIs. And they don't appear fairy-like or magical, but they have all the other properties of the type. They have the bubbling momentum and body space of PE, so they're definitely PE leads, and they have the broad ranging possibility orientation of NE, so we know they're NE leads, and then they have the candid expression from the mouth and the wobbling, so we know that they're FI, but their FI radiates out kind of a sarcasm. Okay, and that wraps up our initial view of the NEFI types.